we'll go through some questions and and then wrap this whole program up. So audience out there, please, I encourage you to drop questions in the chat as we go. I'll try to get to them if I can. Otherwise, I need to take stock here first to see who I have with me. We've got Kyle, David, Ryan, David, and Dennis and Steve. Oh, a rowdy bunch. Okay, let's get started then. I hear feedback. Is that just on my computer, or does anyone else hear that? Good? I just might be talking too loud too. So, okay. And Kyle, I realize now, I think you are the only farmer on here, and I was going to save this with the other producers on here with you, but they're not here. So you get one more question here, which is, was organic a goal, or where you ended up after deciding to go regenerative?
So initially, organic, I would say, was the goal initially, but as I became more and more, I guess, introduced to what organic was, I think I had an idea of what organic was, and I came back from all my travels to all these organic farms and was going to just do organic in Michigan, and that was nothing like what I experienced in both Washington in the US and as well as locally. Is that organic was a very just replacing conventional practices, like I mentioned earlier, with an organic substitute. And really, I realized that wasn't going to work for us. So we had to completely shift our mindset and developed a passion for regenerative. And now that is our goal across our entire farm, is to become regenerative in every aspect of what we do. And we are in that journey, in the midst of that journey. So.
Very good. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to jump to some of the questions we missed earlier today. And David Miller, that is, I'm going to come to you, which is, can we measure, can we measure soil composition? You spoke about that very early in your presentation, organic, water, air, mineral. Can we measure that on our farms?
Not other than physical observations. I'm not aware of any analysis that you can stick a probe in and say, okay, we've got X amount of pore space, etc. But by digging, you will be able to see if you have that crumbly chocolate cake type of texture, and that's what you're looking for. And you should have a beautiful earthy aroma, which is indicating that you have good soil biology. So if you want to know where you are with soil health, just dig up a handful of soil and smell it.
I love that. And I've heard that before. So I do love that. I wonder how many in our audience are doing that already. If not, maybe that's a habit we start. David Knaus, how much this is another question from yours. How much does your sap testing cost, and how often do you recommend growers using it?
So it's $85 per set. And we recommend, it really varies on by crop. And we have sampling guides for, 40 or 50 different crop types on our website. So I'd encourage you, whoever is asking the question, just to take a peek at some of the sampling guides up there, and they'll tell you. Typically it's 4 to 6 times per season, depending on the crop though.
Great, thank you. Okay, Kyle, have you seen a decrease in beneficial insects by using high rates of sulfur as a fungicide?
Sulfur specifically, I would say. So one of the big issues with sulfur is that it is going to limit photosynthesis. It's actually deterring a lot of. It's quite caustic on the tree itself. So just when you use sulfur in general, you want to be very sparing with it, because it does decrease the photosynthetic capacity, especially like lime sulfur, for example, can stop photosynthesis entirely for several days. But I don't know how much sulfur directly inhibits it, but for example, kaolin clay is something we use at specific times to deter pests, plum curculio specifically, and we do notice a decrease in predators when we use that. So there are a lot of things you have to be cautious with.
Very good. And I have a bunch of gentlemen here. Gentlemen, if you ever want to hop into any of these questions and respond, please hop right in. Okay. So we've talked a lot. I think throughout several presentations today, we heard about kind of supply chains and markets. Would be interested in hearing about the market.
Thank you.
Oh, perfect. This is great to have Rick included on. Hi, Rick.
Hi, how we doing?
We're going to throw you right in here, okay? All right. So we talked about supply chains today. We talked about markets, talked about pricing. I would love to hear, and price premiums specifically. I'd love to hear a little bit about the markets that either Rick and Kyle, you guys are actually selling into, and whether there's premium pricing and if they play a role. And also for David and Dennis and Steve, or either David, some of the farmers you work into, if you have any examples, trying to get at the point of what does the market for regenerative look like, and are people getting premiums for this, or are people taking on these practices and waiting for the premiums later? Anybody want to hop into that very wordy question yet? Rick, I'll call you
I can
first.
go.
Yeah.
I can go. Yeah, right now, Sarah, we are the only premium that we're getting for anything that we're raising right now is the beef from the cattle and the lamb from the sheep. We are getting a premium for those direct markets, and they are being sold as regenerative natural. It's not organic and it's not grass fed. It's just natural regenerative. We are starting to get premiums for alfalfa that we're raising, but we're not getting any premium for regenerative corn or soybeans. So right now, the traditional row crops, and as far as I know, at least in our market, are still status quo, no premium.
Yeah, for us, we have yet to find a substantial market for regenerative. We've had a lot of dialogues, and we've had a few companies reach out, but it was for quantities that would only cover an acre or so of our supply. So we've been kind of waiting up until this year to get our ROC certification. So we're going to apply for that this year and see how it's recognized. I think the challenge is, of course, like everyone's mentioned, is there's that middle person is just kind of missing. We've got a lot of middle people we work with, but they're pretty content with organic. They don't really see the reason to sell regenerative, especially if they're growing organic themselves and they see regenerative as competition, regenerative organic as competition to that. So those dialogues have been not heated by any means, but there's just a little friction there. So we would love to be able to have the bandwidth to do this ourselves, but it's a lot to take on all of that middleman role. So.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a gap that exists in the middleman recognizing it, or in a mechanism to skip over the middleman and get to consumers in another way.
Which would you recommend? Both ways, yeah.
Yeah, both. We need both, probably, right?
Right, yeah.
And
I think especially the latter one there, Sarah, is going to be key, allowing the grower to make his price and the consumer to directly interact with the grower via something that's not a middleman determining what quality is in and determining the metrics for payment. We are working with a number of growers producing cotton, working with Citizens of Humanity, who is a group that is really putting the dollars where their mouth is, and very excited about that, creating additional reward for the regenerative growers. I think they are leading with a model that could potentially work very well in other industries or in other crop types.
I really like what John mentioned earlier, the example John gave earlier about the Netherlands and what their supply chain looks like. I think I'm envisioning that for our area as well, but it's difficult to make that big shift like that. I think to get everyone on board, and growers and retailers alike, I think that's a big shift, and you can't necessarily replicate what's going on over there, but we can learn from it maybe.
Yeah, it's something I think about all the time, is how much there's a lot of little micro case studies of this, and I can't wait for them to be amplified and maybe not exactly templated, but used as inspiration to replicate for sure in all areas of the space as it grows. So, okay, pause. I just want to, Taya asked what ROC certification is. It's ROC certification. It's regenerative organic certification. Taya, to answer your question on that, you mentioned that, Kyle. Okay, we have lots of questions rolling in, and some of them are going back more to agronomic. I want to ask a different question first. David Knaus, Ryan, a bunch of us have talked about kind of the paradigm shift, the mindset shift. And Ryan, you mentioned leadership. So I'd love to ask you first and then hear maybe what others think about what your theory of change is as we think about building this new paradigm and that we're going to need regenerative leaders for that. Any thoughts on that? Like, how is that going to happen?
Yeah, I think it starts here, right? It starts with actually getting education on the subject matter of what we're talking about and being able to talk to it very clearly, eloquently when people ask. As you asked me at the end of my talk, how do we use this information? And it's really about what Kyle talked about in his talk, that talk with his father, about really able to establish like clear metrics and clear understanding and clear goals and clear, conversation. That's actually a question I have for Kyle, which is, what is his next conversation with his dad that he's going to have, and what are the goals that his dad are looking at, and are they different than he is looking at, overall? Because I think, we really want to bring these goals together at some point, even though the tactics of what Rick's going to be doing are wildly different than what another farmer might be doing in, say, Tucson, Arizona. But the goals and the ways we want to measure success at the very end result, like you talked about in the food supply and with health and with community resilience, I think we really want to make sure we're aligned. So anyway, I'll go back to my question for Kyle, if you don't mind, and ask him.
Yeah, what are those? Yeah, well, to give you a bit of insight, we've been going through succession for a few years and have been bringing on a consultant for that. And those conversations are lovely, to say the least. It's definitely no friction there at all, changing ownership on a farm. But in regards to regenerative specifically, I think it's oh man, there's a lot of daily conversations, a lot of long-term thinking I think I have a romanticized view, and I have a realistic view for the long term. And oftentimes, if I share too much of that romanticized view, I'm very met with a lot of friction versus just getting the day-to-day steps really, and how do we get through the season and maintain profitability. Essentially, I think the conversation is always him saying, if I can find a means of making it profitable and at the end of the day staying in business, then he will support anything. And I think encouraging him to have patience through some of the different situations with pest and disease and just this whole process. Like we've spent the first 3 years of transition, had losses every year and had to keep him going. And we had a lot of challenges horticulturally and yeah, it's fortunate I had a lot of understanding coming from him. So I'm entirely grateful in that conversation. If we weren't both fairly level-headed, could definitely have ended very, very quickly. And we've seen it happen on other neighboring farms as well. It's that generational shift. And yeah, I'm sure I'm one of the younger people here. So I think it's all of the millennials coming in with their naive ideas is a little frustrating. And I can see that now when I first came in, how romanticized I did have it all. So I'm glad he was there to ground me through that process.
There's a balance that can be appreciated. That's nice. So I just wanted to open up to others about this idea of kind of what it's going to take, maybe from the more human perspective, to shift this paradigm.
One of the things that I think is going to be very important for this shift to happen is for growers to be able to accurately account for the transition of input costs and the actual profitability by field, by treatment. We found over this decade of working with growers that's often a real challenge. Is there's additional input costs on the nutrition side that is often not accounted for on the reduction of other inputs or other management practices that can be reduced. For example, a strawberry grower that would reduce nitrogen, the plant size was smaller on the control, and therefore they didn't have to make 2 passes of going through and trimming the plants down, which cost them a couple $100 per acre per pass. And where is that equated into the equation? And so we've recently just been really realizing and hearing from growers that we actually don't really know the numbers. And James Johnson has been putting out a lot of his numbers of what his actual costs were. And so I think that's one of the key things for empowering growers is leading and guiding and making resources available to help manage that transition in accounting and accounting for all of the practices that are being affected.
Great. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just like to add that, you know, the leadership ultimately, in my mind, comes from Mother Nature, right? And so if we can really tune into what she's trying to tell us, then we're going to have a really much better chance of success, right? And so by tuning into that leadership, following that lead, and working within that framework, using her as our model over and over and over in, you know, different ways, patterns and systems and so on and so forth. You know, those are the solutions that I think are going to be the most long lasting, and the less subject to some of these other outside influences.
You know, I guess, Sarah, I look at it as getting away from the idea as yield is king. I have a lot of growers now that, as they say, their yields aren't as high. They've cut back a little bit on yields, but their cost per acre is way down. And so they're actually making more money. And that's in wheat and corn. And then the same holds true in fruit trees. Is a couple growers that I've worked with that now say they don't have what they call as a record yield, but they have very, very high pack outs. They have good quality size pack out at a premium price. And I think getting them to understand some of those concepts when you go into this regenerative process, that you can produce great quality crops. And, you know, I think the corn and the wheat, kind of like Rick is talking about now, that's slow to come along, but I'm seeing a lot of it in the fruit industry. I have quite a few fruit growers and some of the specialty crops that are getting premiums for some of their stuff, because of storability, because of pack out, because of quality, all of those types of things that you look for. They're now starting to get paid a premium, and some are doing it themselves, and some are actually finding specialty markets that it gets directly shipped to.
Love that. Great. Rick, anything to add on there before I pass this?
Yeah, I'd like to. I think a lot about this regenerative movement we're in the middle of, and I just worry about greenwashing and it's all going to disappear. And I feel that kind of creeping up on us here a little bit. But I really think what we have to do, and let's just look at the United States first. I think we have to look at the United States and regionalize what, you know, I think you can put it in 9 regions. I do a lot of thinking about this kind of stuff. And we need a mentor for each region to then understand how you raise rice regeneratively. How do you raise wheat in the high plains regeneratively? This is all different than it's going to be for the folks in the Southwest. And then once we get that playbook, so to speak, of how do we do regenerative in the high plains, and then we have the resources of people to go to. And I totally agree with the way John kicked this off this morning. All this burden is on the farmer. We have to shift some of this away from the farmer, and get help from the people in the middle, and figure out how to make this. And Sarah, if you think about, I don't want to use the word carbon market, but if you think about a soil health score or something like that, those scores are going to be differently in the high plains than they're going to be in the Midwest. I mean, that's a no-brainer. So those rules need to be set up accordingly, I think, for that part of the context. Where are you? And then you move it to around the world.
Yep. Be an example for that. And that will take a lot of organizing, which brings us back. I'll just reiterate Ryan's point. We need more regenerative leaders in the space to take this on. Okay. I'm going to go through, we have just a few more minutes left. I'm going to go through a few like rapid fire questions from our audience. So I will start with our Tanio team. How do synthetic microorganisms compete against natural microorganisms that come from a natural environment, such as soil conditions from a fish hatchery? That was hard. Go ahead.
Synthetic organisms. I like genetically modified organisms. I guess I'm having trouble understanding the question. And then and the second part was fish hatchery.
Yeah.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the question.
Man, I read that long question and now I have to read it again because I don't know it.
Okay.
Wait. So microorganisms compete against natural organisms that come from natural environments. I'll say if you are in the audience, please reiterate that question and we'll move on.
No, I
We
think
get it now.
Yeah, I think I understand that
Oh,
better.
you do? Okay. Okay. Got it.
Go ahead. Dennis, go.
Well, I guess I look at it sometimes we have to look at the level of soil health. And as we head down this regenerative path, a lot of times we've got to get that fire started. We've got to do all those things we can to get us. I mean, we want to speed up this process as quickly as we possibly can. So early on, does it make sense to use some inoculums, use some cover crops, implement those animal component, basically get the fire started, get it ignited, because a lot of times I talk about we have to build habitat to support these organisms within the soil environment. If we have no habitat and we're just doing cover crops, it's going to take a long time to get there. But if we can speed that process up using inoculums or teas or whatever tool you choose to use in order to speed up that process, we just get there quicker. I mean, so I have a lot of orchard guys, organic orchard guys that start out with heavy with biological inoculums. Then they get their tree health up, they get those exudates, they get all these processes going. They back off on the inoculums and they just do food sources. And at certain times a year, maybe coming out of the spring, they might do a light inoculum application for phosphorus solubility because they know when the temperatures are cold, they're not going to get the phosphorus they need. Then they move on. So I think a lot of it is where are you at? I mean, Rick talked about soil health. I mean, prime example, the Palouse is not the same as Ritzville in Washington State wheat country. I mean, one is a rocky, terrible soil and one is some of the best soil in the world. So the two processes are going to be totally different sometimes to getting them started. And that's where you need to go to basically like-minded growers that have been through this process and talk to reliable distributors of different products that are going to basically not sell you a product. They're going to sell you a program that's going to actually benefit you as a grower. And I think that's what's most important.
Well, and I think about kind of what we started our presentation on, talking about the idea of nature's time scale versus agricultural need time scale. If it doesn't matter and we're okay with waiting 500 to 1,000 years, sure, Mother Nature can come in and fix most of those problems. But I compared a lot of times to cover crop seed. Yeah, you can wait for legumes to come in. You can wait for some of your radishes to come in, but to do the job more quickly, you're going to be seeding with a specific mix. And that's kind of where I think having those blends come in, where we're seeding our crops, we're seeding our seed with those specific, I'm going to say seeds again, but we're utilizing those specific organisms to do the job more quickly than we otherwise would be able to. So is there going to be competition? Yeah, I think so. But again, a lot of that's going to be driven by the plant. The plant is most of the time in the driver's seat and dictating who it wants, when it wants it, and what it wants from it.
And that's a lot of times why we recommend diversity, just like we talk cover crops with biological inoculums. Try and stay away from that single microbe approach, single function, unless you're specifically going after a lot of these disease controls. And even then I say diversity because they all help build, they all support each other within that environment.
Yeah. I mean, everything you do has an impact on the soil organisms, the plants, the biology that's there. So if you think that doing an inoculum is the only way you're going to be adjusting those natural species, well, no. Everything you do is going to make a difference in that soil environment, that plant environment, and that microbiome that surrounds all those living things.
Yeah, fair point. It's all connected. Rick, a question for you. Someone's curious about your long-term no-till crop rotation, particularly for alfalfa establishment. What crop precedes it?
What crop precedes alfalfa? Typically a cereal grain, because then we have time to get that established yet in that season. It's big enough to survive the winter. Then when you come out of the winter, you've got the whole next year to get all of your cuttings. If you establish the alfalfa in the spring, which we do sometimes as well, you're probably going to miss at least for sure one cutting and possibly two. So it kind of cuts into the profitability of getting that acre into that transition. But Sarah, when you have the opportunity and you have a buyer of that alfalfa, this is the best way that we transitioned into organic from even being regenerative. We were still able to receive good income on those transition acres of alfalfa, and we were mitigating or suppressing most of the weed bank. So when we roll out of the alfalfa into corn, you're starting with a clean slate, except for the alfalfa that's there. There's no other weeds. So I really like alfalfa, but we have to be careful. Like any other legume, it's very hard on the soil. The soil collapses in on itself. You're pulling all of the carbon out. It's high protein, high nitrogen environment, and that's usually doesn't spell good for biology and soil health. But the Tanio gentleman may have a product that could help you get spun out of that. And I wanted to ask them a question while we're here, if we could. Guys, how quick can you change a bacterial-based environment into more of a fungal, or let's say balance? You're 80% biological, and I want to get to a 50-50. Do you have a product that can get us there in one growing season?
As you know, there's a lot of variables that are based off of food, soil health, all those types of things. But I mean, one of the things we can look at, we've been doing some research with Montana State University, and it's very interesting to show the research is showing that using Spectrum, one of our products that really don't contain any fungal at all, by utilizing that product in both alfalfa was one of the crops and pastures was another crop. In both instances, they built the fungal community in both of those by just using the bacterial dominated product. And the reason for that is it goes back to the idea of habitat.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was a 4-year study that they did.
So is that a foliar feed, guys? Is that what that is?
No, it was actually a soil applied.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me how I would use that in a alfalfa that's already established. I've taken the first cutting off. Would we come in and foliar feed and get any effect?
My recommendation would be is you are non-irrigated, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So if we can time that around doing a soil application, if we can get a soil application down, maybe around a timely rain, let that plant start to come up, and then do a regular foliar application with like the Micro 5000 and a little 10 grams of Spectrum with a trace mineral package, a fertilizer package to support photosynthesis and exudates balanced, and then let that get that fire started. That would be my recommendation, that I usually follow up with alfalfa or grass hay after a cutting.
All right. Sounds good.
There we go. Okay, well, we are getting really close here to the end of this program, so I want to ask you all to answer one question again, sort of a lightning round since we're short on time here. But what is one piece of advice you would offer an audience of growers looking to take their first steps or their next steps into regenerative? What is one thing you want them to walk away with today for those who are sitting in the audience? David Knaus, you're right in the middle of my screen. I'm going to have you go first.
The circle takes the square.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So I would say if you're completely conventional and just coming at this for the first time, then the most important thing to do would be to understand that carbon should be thought of as equally as important, if not more important, than an NPK. And if you include that into your crop planning and your fertilizer applications, that's the very first step, in my opinion, to starting to go regenerative.
Love that. Okay, David Miller, you're up.
The first, or what I would encourage everybody to take from this is evaluate what you are doing currently that is the most harmful to the system, and then reduce that or switch that out. So for example, might be instead of using DAP, just switch it to MAP, just change it dollar for dollars and use MAP, or take potassium chloride and switch it for potassium sulfate. Reduce your nitrogen by a safe amount on all of your acres, and do some daring things on a small amount of acres where you can kind of feel your way through it. So be safe with the risk that you take, but start taking deliberate steps and think 10 years down the road and where you want to be in 10 years. And remember that you have to be into this at least 3 years before you make any decisions at all about whether it's working or not.
Wonderful. Thank you. Kyle, you are up next.
I would say do this at a small scale to start with, and collaborate with other people so you can all combine your learned steps together. And yeah, don't forget to try and regenerate yourself along the way. Don't neglect yourself. I think burnout is very common in the industry, and you can't be a regenerative farmer if you're not there to do the farming.
Yeah, I love that message. All right, Ryan, what's your advice?
I would say be confident that you're making a change for a reason, and remember that why as you go into those struggles and those challenges, that you made this change for a reason and you're committed to this. And then also know that this community is second to none with the amount of information that it will provide and give you and help you along the way. I really have never come across a group of people who are more open and helping people change. So have confidence.
Love it. All right. Dennis and Steve, who are like trying to like think of their answer together here. Who's up first?
3, 2, 1. Test, don't guess. Yeah, we did it.
Well rehearsed, guys. That's awesome.
You know, I mean, what I would say is there are plenty of individuals out there that are being very successful at doing this. Find out who those people are. Surround yourself with like-minded people growing the same crops. Utilize the people that are out there. There's a lot of conferences like this. If you would look 10 years ago, I mean, there weren't that many choices. Now you could basically do one of these conferences, if not every week, at least every other week throughout the entire fall. Take advantage of these. Learn and figure out what you can apply to your farm. And again, take small steps, baby steps, and learn through that process. I like Rick's, I'm not going to say it, but I like, as he said, he didn't have any failures. I'll just leave it at that. I'll leave it for his quote on his own.
And you want me to follow all these people with this
Bring us home, Rick. Let's go.
Okay. I totally agree with everything that everyone said. I'm going to add, don't be stubborn. I'm a very stubborn person, and the Tanio gentleman nailed it earlier when you got to have diversity, not only in your regenerative journey with how you're handling your farm, but you need diversity with your biology package. I did not have a biology package running with me side by side. I'm working on getting that accomplished now. And it's all about turning on or turning off certain sectors that you need at certain times. So I just, find those, and you got 2 reputable companies on this right now. I mean, you've got ADA and you got Tanio there. So find your company, find your people you like, and come up with a biological program that's going to run and be happy with what your end results are. We got to know what the end game is so you can come up with a plan. So, and to help the Tanio guys out here, I don't like the word failure. It's outcomes I did not expect. and what are we going to learn from those outcomes? So thanks guys.
Sarah, nice try. You don't get out of this.
Oh no, I was too busy taking in everything you guys just said. So I'm biased. I mean, I agree. You guys are the experts in this, in the production side of things. I might just add to kind of piggyback on some of what you said. Collaboration is key in this space, and I think there's collaborators in this space that many folks don't even think of right now. And that's coming from my experience in the funding and investment sector. So be open to talking to those people who are curious and learning how to help this space and help them learn, and then they'll probably help you. So.
Hey, Sarah, can I say one more thing? The last thing I'd like to say is we need to really take what John said at the beginning and take this home. And that's you, Sarah. How do we get the people, and you and Ryan, how do we get the people in the middle here on board? We need a conference of just those middle people and a handful of farmers, and not have this a conference, just a total 7 hours of discussions and conversations.
Yep.
No PowerPoint presentations, just discussions.
Does RFSI do something like that on occasion?
I mean, we do convene lots of people, especially those in the middle and on both ends, and the people who fund them. So yeah, October 2024. There's a plug for you on that. But
on the calendar.
Thanks for giving me that, throwing me that apple. Okay, gentlemen, this was awesome. Thank you so much for everything you contributed to today's program. Really appreciate it. I know our audience did. So thank you. And we look forward to watching what each one of you accomplishes as 2023 proceeds.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Awesome job.
Okay, well, we certainly hope that all of you out there in our audience have learned a lot today to inform your regenerative journey, and we're excited to continue this journey with you, so please do stay in touch. If you have any more questions, please contact the organizers or join them in the expo booth in just a few minutes. They are here to help. AEA consultants can help you create your regen nutrition programs for large farms or give you a sample crop program for small operations. They have a wealth of information. Tanio Biologicals can be contacted for more information to get started with your biological program. And you can always sign up for Kind Harvest to get in touch with their social network and the resources that they have at their disposal. So please do follow up. With that, that is all we have for our programming here on the stage today. Thank you again for taking the time to learn with us. And we look forward to seeing you on the road to regenerative.
On the road again.
That's right.
Can't wait to be on the road again. Oh, we're not muted, are we?
No.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Tanner, we really appreciate
thank you.
it. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, everybody. Ryan, David, Kyle.
See you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
David.
Really appreciate it. We appreciate your time today.